For a closer look, we are joined by Sarjoh Bah, a senior fellow at New York University's Center on International Cooperation. Mr. Bah writes frequently about Somalia. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Is today's arrest in Australia by the police of these militants that have been linked to Somalia and apparently to al-Qaeda an indication that those that sympathize with al-Qaeda in Somalia are now being exported, in other words, going to other countries to create trouble?
I think it's a bit more complicated than that. As you know, there are some significant Somali diaspora communities, scattered, around the world, including places like Australia and here in the United States, concentrated mostly in Minneapolis. What you have is, especially with the arrest in the arrest in Australia of the Somalis, is young men and women from these diaspora communities going back into Somalia, receiving training, and in some cases fighting on the side of some of the groups that are engaged in the conflict in that country, and then going back into their host communities. And the arrest in Australia, a clear demonstration of the challenges of having these huge diasporan communities that are involved in the conflict directly or indirectly. But in this case, we are seeing direct involvement with groups with terrorist links like Alshabab. So this is, it's a very worrying trend that keeps law enforcement and intelligence agencies in these countries
Well,
awake.
you mentioned up there in Minneapolis, and that is a case, of course, of great concern of the U.S. The belief is that they go to Somalia, receive some sort of training, and then would come back, in this case, to the U.S. and possibly could carry out a terrorist attack.
Well, most of these are first generation, Americans, so but they still have this affinity, or they still have these linkages with Somalia. So they go out there, get training, and then eventually they come back to this country, and only them, they are the only ones who know what kind of activities they will embark on. But the worrying thing about this, trend is we saw what happened in London with the attacks there, where the folks who carried out those attacks were first generation Pakistanis who, followed the same trend, trained in Pakistan and came back. So this is quite a worrying trend. But then the bigger issue is, how do you deal with this without actually stigmatizing the entire community?
Well, I want to bring up Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. She's heading to Africa. She's going to meet with the president of Somalia. What do you expect to come out of that?
Well, I think this is quite significant, because so far we haven't seen the administration's policy on the broader horn, and including Somalia. And what may be, what we probably hope to see out of this visit is the beginnings of, seeing the policy of the current administration on dealing with the Somalia situation. So far, over the past 6 months, it has been fairly quiet from the administration. But I'm quite certain that this visit, will be the beginning of something, more positive and more proactive on the part of the administration.
Sarjoh Bah, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.